Joining me in the studio to offer his analysis is the news editor of the Jewish News, Justin Cohen, a familiar face to our viewers. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
Talking earlier to Carl Bostic, he said, look, it is a fluid situation when you're looking at the numbers of people who've been killed, but we've had these reports that 13 Israeli soldiers have been killed. So that's likely to have a pretty strong impact on the Israeli public, isn't it?
It will absolutely have a strong impact. I think that in the days leading up to the launch of the ground offensive, many Israelis were feeling that they wanted to, at all costs, avoid going into Gaza to have boots on the ground. But at the same time, there was a feeling that these rockets were continuing to terrorise large swathes of the country, not just the south, as they have been for the last 8 years or since the evacuation of Gaza, but into the central and into Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And so there was a feeling that if those rockets didn't stop, they would have to go in, and which, in the end, Benjamin Netanyahu has sanctioned. Right,
so you've had two things which appear to be happening in terms from the Israeli perspective. That the loss of life amongst members of the military, also reports as yet not confirmed as such by the Israelis themselves, that a soldier has been kidnapped. So if that claim turns out in any way to be true, how is it likely to impact on the government's strategy in terms of how it's conducting this offensive?
First of all, it's my understanding that the IDF have now denied that claim by Hamas that a soldier has been kidnapped. It just goes to show the sanctity of every single soldier. This is a society where everyone has a family member in the army. Conscription is a policy, and so the idea of kidnapping a soldier and the price that Israel is willing to pay to bring back those soldiers, Hamas is very much aware of, and we saw with Gilad Shalit.
So that could be a game changer.
I don't think it will deter the Netanyahu government from pushing forward with this campaign to stop the rockets. That is clearly what they plan on doing, and they show no sign of stopping that. I think that what it will do is it will heighten tensions within the Israeli society, and that's exactly, unfortunately, what Hamas are trying to do.
Because the whole point about it is that Benjamin Netanyahu has basically said, look, we're going to continue until those tunnels are broken, until the missiles stop firing. Yep. So that implies that this could be quite a protracted conflict in itself, which raises the possibility that more soldiers could be killed. And as you said, because of that relationship between the public and the military, if more lives are lost, that may well provoke a groundswell in the public.
I think we're some way away from any feeling en masse within Israeli society that this is the wrong policy.
Right, but I'm certainly talking about the idea that this will be protracted.
Again, I feel that Israelis know that they've been under attack for all these years, and that finally the government has decided that time has come to stop these rockets. And I think that they will know in a war situation that losses will be incurred. I think yesterday was the biggest loss of Israeli soldiers on a single day for years for the Israelis, and this will really actually, highlight how difficult this situation will be.
It highlights how difficult the situation will be, but doesn't it also perhaps highlight the fact that Israel may have underestimated Hamas's capabilities? In other words, the group that it's fighting now is different to the group that it fought back in 2012 and even further.
Possibly. This is a terrorist organisation bent on Israel's destruction. We know that they'll go to any length. We know that they'll fire on civilians, so soldiers are certainly legitimate targets they would consider. We unfortunately will have to see over the coming days whether the rockets are stemmed enough that Israel can stop this offensive, because it wasn't an offensive that Netanyahu ever wanted to go into. As you pointed out earlier on, there were many ministers within the Israeli government that were pushing him to go into Gaza much earlier on, and he was holding back from that. He couldn't hold back forever.
Right, but how united are they now? And is it possible that as they get more dug in, as they get more protracted, as there is international condemnation, that perhaps the front of unity might actually crack?
I think within Israel, the society and the government are now completely united. Conflict, unfortunately, has an ability to bring together people in a way that perhaps other times don't. And I think society is united, both in the public and in the political level.
But then there is the international pressure, and it comes back to this issue of proportionality, because we saw a heavy death toll over the weekend amongst the Palestinians, and there is the argument that whilst Israel is trying to track down Hamas militants, it's the fact that you're targeting neighbourhoods. There can be no pinpoint precision if you have hundreds of people who are being killed and they're being attacked in areas which have a large urban build-up.
Every loss of civilian life is a huge sadness, is mourned by people in Israel. But I think when you've got a terrorist organisation that is willing to fire rockets from within civilian populations, and at the weekend we found that UN found 20 rockets within a school in Gaza. If Hamas are willing to adopt that cynical ploy and fire rockets from within those populations, it's understandable that Israel will want to target those launches. Unfortunately, sometimes civilians will be killed in those circumstances.
Because I suppose the argument is that because of the degree of force that's being used, people really have nowhere to evacuate to. That yes, they are told you need to move on, but if there's nowhere to go because the strip is heavily populated, then you're more likely to have civilian casualties.
Yeah, you pointed out that Israel does call on people well in advance to leave those homes.
But they have nowhere to go, though. That's the problem.
There are places to go for some people. I realise that some civilians are going to get killed, and that's a complete tragedy. No one says otherwise. But Israel is not targeting these people. I heard Samin Campbell on the radio this morning comparing the loss of life in Gaza to the loss of life on flight MH17. Now, one appears to be a deliberate murder attempt on the plane, and the other simply is not. There is no comparison.
OK, Justin Cohen, sadly, time runs against us. I have a feeling we'll be talking again later in the week, but in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us with your analysis of that situation. Thank you.